My dear friend, have you ever felt a restlessness in your soul? A nagging sense that something in your life is out of alignment with God's plan? Perhaps it's a relationship that once brought joy, but now leaves you drained, unsettled, or far from the peace God promises. The Bible tells us in Romans 8:28, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. But what happens when God's good requires letting go of someone you've held dear? Today we're diving into a truth that may sting but will set you free. God sometimes delivers you not by adding to your life, but by subtracting from it. Not every person who started with you is meant to finish with you. Before we begin, I invite you to like this message, subscribe for more, and type amen in the comments if you believe God has a word for you today. Let me take you to the pages of Genesis 13, where we find Abraham and Lot, two men journeying together, their herdsmen quarreling over land. The tension was palpable, the unity strained. Abraham, in his God-given wisdom, didn't cling to Lot or force the relationship to endure. Instead, he said, "Let us not have strife. You choose your path, and I'll take mine." Lot looked with human eyes and chose the land that seemed greener, the plains of Sodom that sparkled with promise. But Abraham trusted God's hand, and that separation led him straight into God's greater blessing, the land of Canaan, the foundation of a nation. That separation wasn't rejection, it was redirection. My friend, God sometimes removes people from your life, not to punish you, but to position you for his purpose. Think about a gardener pruning a tree. The gardener doesn't hate the branches he cuts. He cuts them because they're draining the tree's strength, blocking its growth. In the same way, God prunes your life, removing relationships that sap your spiritual vitality. I heard of a young woman named Sarah who clung to a friendship that drained her. Every conversation left her anxious, questioning her worth, far from the joy of the Lord. She prayed, "God, why can't I make this work?" But one day she felt a stirring in her spirit, a loss of peace that wouldn't relent. When she finally let go, trusting God's prompting, she found new doors opening, new friends who lifted her faith, new opportunities to serve in her church. What she thought was loss was God's preparation for a season of fruitfulness. You see, God's subtraction is not about abandonment. It's about alignment. When someone's presence in your life stirs unrest, when their words or actions pull you from God's path, it's not just a clash of personalities, it's a divine signal. Colossians 3:15 says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts." Peace is God's umpire, the compass of your soul. When it's missing, God is speaking. Maybe you're holding on to someone right now, a friend, a partner, even a family member, because you fear being alone or you feel obligated. But what if God is saying, "My child, let them go, for I have something greater for you"? What if the pain of release is the doorway to the peace you've been craving? I ask you today, my friend, what relationship in your life is stealing your peace? Is there someone whose presence leaves you restless, whose words dim the light of God's calling on your life? Don't ignore the stirring in your spirit. God's subtraction is not cruel, it's compassionate. He sees what you cannot. A future where your destiny shines brighter without the weight of misaligned connections. Like Abraham, you may need to make a hard choice to say, "This is where we part ways." Not out of anger, but out of obedience. Trust that when God removes something, he replaces it with purpose. He's preparing you for a Canaan, a place of promise where your soul can thrive. I urge you now to act in faith. If God is nudging you to release someone, don't delay. Pray this prayer. Lord, give me the courage to let go of what you're pruning. Align my life with your purpose. Take that step today, trusting that God's hand is steady. He's not taking away to leave you empty. He's making room for His blessings to multiply. Surrender that relationship to Him and watch how He restores your peace and sets your feet on the path to your destiny. Don't let fear hold you back. God's plan is greater than your pain. My dear friend, when the storms of life swirl around you, when your heart feels heavy and your spirit unsettled, have you stopped to consider that God might be speaking through the absence of peace? The Bible declares in Colossians 3:15, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you are called to peace." Peace is not just a fleeting feeling, it's God's compass for your soul, guiding you toward His will. When someone's presence in your life disrupts that peace, leaving you anxious, drained, or restless, it's not a mere coincidence. It's a divine signal. God is raising a red flag, saying, "This is not where I want you to be." Today we're exploring how the loss of peace is God's way of warning you to release relationships that hinder His plan for your life. When it points true north, you know your direction is clear. But if it spins wildly, something is interfering. In the same way, when someone's presence causes your peace to spin erratically, God is showing you an interference in your destiny. I think of a man named David, not the king of Israel, but a modern-day believer I heard about. David had a business partner who seemed like a blessing at first, charming, ambitious, full of ideas. But over time, every meeting left David uneasy, his sleep troubled, his spirit heavy. He couldn't pinpoint why. But the peace of Christ was gone. One night he prayed, and God brought Proverbs 14:30 to mind. A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. David realized this partnership was misaligned with God's will. When he let it go, peace flooded back, and God opened new doors that aligned with His calling. You see, peace is God's signature of approval. When it's absent, He's sounding an alarm. The Bible tells us about Jonah, a man who ran from God's call and boarded a ship to Tarsus. Jonah 1:4 says, "Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break out." Jonah's disobedience brought turmoil, not just to him but to everyone around him. That unrest was God's voice saying, "You're going the wrong way." My friend, if someone in your life consistently stirs chaos in your heart, if their presence makes blessings feel like burdens, God may be telling you, as He told Jonah, to change course. You cannot thrive in confusion. You cannot walk in destiny while losing your inner calm. Let me ask you a piercing question. Is there someone in your life whose presence makes your spirit feel like a stormy sea? You know the one. Every conversation leaves you unsettled. Every encounter drains your joy. Maybe it's a friend who criticizes your faith, a colleague who stirs anxiety, even a family member whose words leave you questioning God's plan. Whatever the case, don't ignore the loss of peace. Romans 8:14 reminds us, "For those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God." The Holy Spirit speaks through peace. And when it's gone, He's urging you to act. Holding on to someone who robs your peace is like clinging to a sinking ship, hoping it will carry you to shore. It won't. Only God's path leads to safety. I want to challenge you with a real-life illustration. Imagine a woman named Rachel who stayed in a toxic relationship because she feared being alone. Her partner's constant negativity left her doubting her worth. Yet she held on thinking, maybe this is all I deserve. But one Sunday, her pastor preached on Isaiah 26:3. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. Rachel realized her lack of peace was God's warning. With tears, she surrendered the relationship to God, and though it hurt, she found a peace that surpassed understanding. New doors opened, a community of believers who lifted her a renewed sense of purpose. What she thought was loss was God's redirection. My friend, what will you choose today? Will you cling to a relationship that steals your peace, or will you trust God's compass to guide you? The enemy wants you to stay in turmoil, to believe that letting go means defeat. But God says letting go is victory. Philippians 4:7 promises, and the peace of God which transcends all understanding will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. That peace is yours if you'll release what God is pruning. Don't let fear keep you chained to chaos. Trust that God's subtraction is preparation for His addition. I call you to action now. Pray this prayer with me. Lord, show me where my peace is being stolen. Give me the strength to release what you're asking me to let go. Take a moment today to examine your relationships. If someone's presence consistently disrupts your peace, ask God for wisdom to act. It may mean setting boundaries, having a hard conversation, or even walking away. Whatever He leads you to do, obey quickly. God's plan for you is a life of peace, purpose, and power. Don't settle for less. My dear friend, have you ever felt your heart tugging toward a dream, a calling, a purpose that God has placed within you, only to find someone in your life pulling you in the opposite direction? The Bible warns us in 2 Corinthians 6:14, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? When God has set a path before you, a divine assignment to fulfill, He is jealous for your devotion to it. But some relationships, no matter how dear, can become anchors, dragging you away from His plan. Today we're looking at how God separates you from those who pull you from your purpose. Not to hurt you, but to protect the destiny He's written for your life. Let's turn to the story of Samson in Judges 16:19-20. Samson was anointed by God from birth, gifted with supernatural strength to deliver Israel. But Delilah, with her subtle influence, drew him away from his calling. The Bible says after putting him to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 locks of his hair, and his strength left him. Then she called, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Samson's tragedy wasn't a sudden fall, it was a slow drift, lulled by a relationship that distracted him from God's purpose. My friend, the enemy doesn't always attack with obvious destruction. He uses subtle distractions to derail your destiny. I heard about a young man named Michael, a gifted musician with a heart to lead worship. He had a friend, well-meaning but skeptical, who constantly questioned his calling. Why waste your talent on church music? The friend would say, you could make real money in the industry. Over time, Michael's passion for worship faded, replaced by doubts and worldly ambitions. But one night, reading Psalm 37:4, take delight in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Michael felt God's voice stirring. He realized his friend's influence was pulling him from his purpose. When he distanced himself, his passion for worship returned, and God opened doors to lead others into His presence. That separation wasn't loss. It was liberation. You see, your purpose is like a flame, fragile yet powerful. Some people are oxygen, igniting your passion, encouraging your dreams and stirring your faith. Others are like water dousing your zeal, smothering your fire. The Bible warns in Proverbs 13:20, "Walk with the wise and become wise. For a companion of fools suffers harm." Those who pull you from prayer, from worship, from the integrity God has called you to, are not aligned with His plan. They may not be evil, but they're misaligned. And misalignment is dangerous. Like a yoke binding two oxen. If one pulls left while you pull toward God's right, you'll wander in circles, never reaching the destiny He's prepared. Let me ask you a question that cuts to the heart. Who in your life is dimming the flame of your God-given purpose? Maybe it's a friend who mocks your faith, a colleague who tempts you to compromise, or even a loved one who discourages your calling because it doesn't fit their vision. Whatever the case, God is calling you to guard your purpose. Think of your calling as a garden. As we said earlier, every seed, your prayers, your dreams, your assignments, is vulnerable to what surrounds it. Some people are sunshine nourishing what God has planted. Others are weeds choking your progress. The enemy is strategic. If he can't destroy you, he'll distract you with relationships that seem harmless but slowly pull you off course. My friend, distraction is more dangerous than destruction because it wastes your years silently. I think of a woman named Lisa who dreamed of starting a ministry for single mothers. Her closest friend, though, always pulled her into gossip and drama, leaving no time for prayer or planning. Lisa felt stuck, her vision fading. But one day she read Jeremiah 29:11. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope in a future." Convicted, she set boundaries with her friend and her ministry began to take root. What looked like a painful separation was God's protection over her purpose. What will you choose today? Will you cling to relationships that dim your calling? Or will you trust God to surround you with those who fan your flame? The enemy wants you to believe you need everyone to fulfill your purpose. But God says, "I am enough." Your calling is too precious to let anyone pull you away. I call you to action now. Pray this prayer. Lord, reveal those who are pulling me from your purpose. Give me courage to protect the calling you placed in me. Take a step today. Maybe it's a conversation, a boundary, or a release. Trust that God's pruning is making room for your purpose to flourish. Don't let distractions steal what God has destined for you. My dear friend, have you ever found yourself drifting from God's path? Not because of a dramatic fall, but through the quiet pull of someone close to you. The Bible warns us in 1 Corinthians 15:33, "Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character." The danger of relationships that distract you from God's purpose isn't always loud or obvious. It's often subtle, creeping in like a slow leak that empties your spiritual strength before you even notice. As we continue, we're looking at how these subtle influences can derail your destiny if you don't guard your heart. God is calling you to recognize the danger of distraction and to protect the sacred calling He's placed within you. Let's revisit Samson's story in Judges 16, but with a fresh perspective. Samson didn't lose his strength in one night. It was a gradual erosion. Delilah's question seemed harmless at first. "Tell me the secret of your strength," but each conversation chipped away at his resolve. Judges 16:16 says, "With such nagging she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it." That's the enemy's tactic. Not a sudden attack, but a persistent drip of distraction that lures you into compromise. Samson didn't see it coming until he was bound, blind, and broken. My friend, the relationships that pull you from God's purpose often don't announce their danger. They wear you down slowly until one day you wake up far from the path God set for you. I heard about a woman named Emily, a teacher with a heart to mentor young girls. She had a friend who seemed fun and supportive, always inviting her to parties and social events. But those gatherings often led to gossip, negativity, and choices that clashed with Emily's faith. Over time, Emily noticed her passion for mentoring wane. She was too busy, too distracted. One Sunday, her pastor quoted Galatians 5:7. You were running a good race. Who cut in on you to keep you from obeying the truth? That verse pierced her heart. Emily realized her friend's influence was pulling her from her calling. When she stepped back from that friendship, her focus returned and her mentoring ministry flourished. What felt like loss was God's rescue. You see, distraction is the enemy's cleverest weapon. Destruction is obvious. You see it coming and fight back. But distraction, it's a slow fade, a gentle tug that pulls you from prayer, from worship, from the quiet moments where God speaks. Proverbs 4:23 urges, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Those who distract you from God's purpose may not mean harm. They may even love you. But if their influence pulls you from His path, they're a danger to your destiny. Think of your calling as a race, as Paul described in 1 Corinthians 9:24. You can't run with focus if someone keeps pulling you off the track, whispering, slow down, it's not that important. Let me ask you a question that demands an answer. Who in your life is subtly pulling you from God's purpose? Maybe it's someone who keeps you from church, saying, you don't need that. Maybe it's a voice that tempts you to skip prayer for worldly pursuits. Or maybe it's someone who makes you feel your God-given dreams are foolish. Whatever the case, God is calling you to wake up before the drift becomes a disaster. Like Samson, you may not realize the Lord's strength is leaving until it's gone. But unlike Samson, you can choose today to guard your purpose. Consider a man named James who dreamed of starting a business rooted in his faith. His old college roommate, though, always mocked his ideas, urging him to chase quick money instead. James felt torn, his vision clouded. But one day, reading Hebrews 12:1, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. James knew he had to act. He distanced himself from that friend, and clarity returned. His business began to take shape, blessing others in ways he never imagined. That separation wasn't rejection. It was God's protection over his purpose. What will you choose today, my friend? Will you let distraction dim your calling, or will you guard the flame God has lit in you? The enemy wants you to believe you can't let go, that you need this person to succeed. But God says, my grace is sufficient for you. 2 Corinthians, your purpose doesn't depend on anyone but Him. I call you to action now. Pray this prayer. Lord, open my eyes to the distractions pulling me from your purpose. Give me strength to let go and run my race. Take a step today. Set a boundary. Say no to that invitation or release that influence. Trust God to surround you with people who ignite your faith, not extinguish it. Your destiny is too precious to lose to distract. My dear friend, have you ever noticed how God's blessings on your life can reveal the true hearts of those around you? The Bible tells us in 1 Samuel 18:8-9, Saul was very angry. They have credited David with tens of thousands, he said, but me with only thousands. And from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. When God elevates you, when his favor shines on your path, some people rejoice, but others grow envious, unable to celebrate your progress. Today we're diving into how jealousy in others is a sign that God may be calling you to distance yourself from those who resent his work in your life. Their envy isn't your fault. It's a signal of misalignment with God's plan for you. Let's linger on Saul and David for a moment. Saul wasn't just a king, he was a man chosen by God. Yet his heart turned dark when David's victories outshone his own. The people sang, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. Wasn't David's doing, but it exposed Saul's insecurity. Instead of rejoicing in God's work through David, Saul's jealousy festered into rage, plotting to harm the very man God anointed. My friend, jealousy isn't about what you've done wrong. It's about the insecurity in someone else's heart when they can't handle the light God has placed on you. When someone can't clap for your blessings, when they dismiss your achievements or belittle your progress, God is showing you they may not belong in your next season. I heard about a woman named Maria, a nurse who felt called to start a community health program. As God blessed her efforts, her colleagues began to change. One in particular started making snide comments, downplaying Maria's success and even spreading rumors. At first, Maria tried to win her over, thinking maybe she's just having a hard time. But then she read Proverbs 14:30. A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. Maria realized her colleagues' envy was poisoning their relationship. When she prayerfully distanced herself, focusing on those who supported her vision, her program grew, touching countless lives. That separation wasn't rejection. It was God protecting her calling. You see, jealousy is insidious, often hiding behind fake smiles or polite words. It shows up in subtle ways, changing the subject when you share good news, minimizing your efforts, or competing where they should celebrate. The Bible warns in James 3:16, "For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder in every evil practice." Someone who can't rejoice in your growth can't truly cover you in prayer. Their envy is a poison packaged in friendliness, but deadly to your destiny. Like Joseph's brothers in Genesis 37, who despised his coat of many colors because it symbolized God's favor. Some people in your life may resent the blessings God is weaving into your story. Let me ask you a heart-piercing question. Who in your life grows quiet or critical when God blesses you? Maybe it's a friend who can't celebrate your promotion, a relative who downplays your faith, or a colleague who competes with your success. Whatever the case, God is using their jealousy to reveal their heart. You weren't called to dim your light to comfort their insecurity. Jesus said in Matthew 5:14, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. If your light exposes darkness in others, that's not your burden. It's their opportunity to repent. But if they choose envy over joy, God may be signaling it's time to let them go." Think of a man named Thomas, who started a small business that began to thrive. His childhood friend, instead of celebrating, made cutting remarks, saying, "You're just lucky." Thomas felt guilty for his success. But one day, reading Psalm 23:5, "You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows," he realized God's favor wasn't something to apologize for. When he stopped seeking his friend's approval, he found peace and new partners who shared his vision. God's blessings often expose who's truly for you. Don't shrink your success to fit their insecurity. Shine as God intended. What will you choose today, my friend? Will you keep chasing the approval of those who envy you, or will you trust God to surround you with people who celebrate His work in you? The enemy wants you to believe you need everyone's applause, but God says my favor is enough. I call you to action now. Pray this prayer. Lord, reveal those who resent your blessings in my life. Give me courage to release them and walk in your favor. Take a step today. Stop apologizing for God's work in you. Set boundaries with those who can't rejoice in your progress. Trust God to bring people who will lift you, not tear you down. Your destiny shines too brightly to be dimmed by envy. My dear friend, have you ever felt the weight of constant conflict in a relationship where every conversation turns into a battle and peace seems like a distant dream? The Bible asks in Amos 3:3, can two walk together except they be agreed? God designed relationships to bring strength and unity, but when strife becomes the foundation, when arguments replace understanding, it's a clear sign that something is misaligned with His will. Today we're exploring how constant strife and conflict in a relationship is God's warning to separate, not out of hate but to preserve the joy and destiny He has planned for you. When God calls you to let go, it's to protect the peace He's promised. Let's return to Genesis 13, where Abraham and Lot faced a crossroads. Their herdsmen were constantly fighting, their resources strained, their unity fractured. Genesis 13:8-9 tells us, so Abram said to Lot, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herders and mine. Let's part company. Abraham didn't cling to Lot out of obligation or sentiment. He recognized that strife was a barrier to God's promise. That separation wasn't about anger, it was about preserving the destiny God had for him. Abraham's choice led to Canaan, the land of promise, while Lot's path led to Sodom's destruction. My friend, when strife reigns in a relationship, God may be urging you to release it to protect the path He set before you. I heard about a woman named Karen who was caught in a cycle of arguments with a close friend. Every discussion ended in tension over opinions, plans, even faith. Karen felt drained, her joy sapped, her focus blurred. She kept trying to fix things, thinking, if I just explain myself better, we'll find peace. But one day she read Proverbs 17:14. Starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam, so drop the matter before a dispute breaks out. Karen realized that constant conflict was like quicksand, pulling her deeper with every struggle. When she prayerfully stepped back from the friendship, her joy returned and she found new relationships that strengthened her faith. That separation wasn't defeat, it was God's deliverance. You see, strife is costly. It robs your sleep, steals your joy, and slows your progress toward God's purpose. Psalm 133:130 declares, how good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. For there the Lord bestows His blessing. Unity is where God commands His blessing, but strife is where the enemy thrives. Satan loves to plant conflict in your closest relationships, knowing it distracts you from your calling. If you're spending more time fighting with someone than fighting for God's purpose, that's not a relationship, it's a battlefield. True God-sent connections may have disagreements, but they're marked by resolution and peace. If strife is the only fruit, it's God's warning to let go. Let me ask you a piercing question. What relationship in your life feels like a constant war? Maybe it's a friend who argues over every decision, a coworker who turns every interaction into a power struggle, or even a family member whose words spark endless tension. Whatever it is, God is speaking through that strife. He's saying, my child, this is not my plan for you. Proverbs 22:10 reminds us, drive out the mocker and out goes strife. Quarrels and insults are ended. Sometimes the only way to restore peace is to release the source of conflict. You weren't created to live in chaos, but to walk in the harmony of God's purpose. Think of a man named Daniel who worked with a colleague who constantly criticized his ideas. Every meeting was a battle, leaving Daniel exhausted and doubting his calling to lead a new project. One night, reflecting on Matthew 5:9, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God," Daniel realized he couldn't make peace where strife was the norm. He prayerfully set boundaries, limiting interactions to what was necessary. The result, his energy returned. His project thrived, and God brought new teammates who shared his vision. That boundary wasn't rejection. It was God's redirection toward peace. What will you choose today, my friend? Will you stay trapped in the quicksand of strife, or will you trust God to lead you to unity and blessing? The enemy wants you to believe you have to endure conflict to prove your love or loyalty. But God says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Matthew 11:30. I call you to action now. Pray this prayer. Lord, show me where strife is stealing my joy. Give me the courage to release what you're calling me to let go. Take a step today. Have that honest conversation. Set a boundary or walk away if God leads. Trust that He's guiding you to relationships that build you up, not tear you down. Your destiny is too precious to be lost in endless battle. My dear friend, have you ever felt the sting of words that cut deeper than a knife, leaving your spirit bruised and your confidence shaken? The Bible declares in Proverbs 18:21, the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Words are not just sounds, they're weapons that can build bridges to your destiny or burn them down. When someone's words consistently wound instead of heal, when their speech tears down your dreams or dims your faith, God is waving a warning flag. Today we're exploring how hurtful words are a sign that God may be urging you to distance yourself from those who speak death into your life, so you can walk in the life-giving relationships He intends. Let's turn to Psalm 55:21, where David laments a friend's betrayal. His speech is smooth as butter, yet war is in his heart. His words were more soothing than oil, yet they were drawn swords. David knew the pain of words that seemed kind but carried venom. Not every sweet word comes from a sweet spirit. Some are honey on the tongue, but poison in the soul. When someone's words leave you feeling small, unworthy, or far from God's purpose, it's not just a bad day. It's a divine signal. God is saying this voice is not for your journey. Contrast this with Jesus' words to Peter in Matthew 16:18. You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. Even in Peter's flaws, Jesus spoke to his potential, not his failures. That's the mark of a God-sent voice. It calls out your greatness, not your shortcoming. I heard about a young man named Stephen who had a mentor he admired deeply. But over time, the mentor's words turned critical, belittling Stephen's ideas and questioning his faith. You're not ready to lead, the mentor would say. Stick to following. Stephen felt crushed, doubting his calling to start a youth ministry. One evening, reading John 663, the words I have spoken to you, they are full of the Spirit and life. Stephen realized God's words build up, not tear down. He prayerfully stepped away from that mentor, and God brought new voices, encouraging faith-filled leaders who saw his potential. Stephen's ministry took off, touching countless lives. That separation wasn't lost. It was God's protection over his spirit. You see, words are prophetic. They either water the seeds of your destiny or scorch them. Someone assigned by God will speak life, even when they correct you, pointing you toward his purpose. But someone God is trying to remove will use their tongue to diminish your identity, assassinate your confidence, or suffocate your joy. Proverbs 15:4 says, "The soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit." If every conversation with someone leaves you emotionally bleeding, God is telling you to guard your heart. You weren't created to endure verbal wounds. You were created to thrive under words that align with God's truth. Let me ask you a question that cuts to the core. Whose words are wounding your soul right now? Maybe it's a friend who criticizes your every step, a family member who mocks your faith, or a colleague whose sarcasm leaves you doubting yourself. Whatever the case, God is speaking through those wounds. He's saying, "My child, you deserve relationships that speak life." Think of Job's wife in Job 2:9, who told him, "Curse God and die." Her words offered despair when Job needed hope. Contrast that with the friends who in Proverbs 27:17 sharpen one another as iron sharpens iron. Godly relationships lift you toward your calling, not drag you into defeat. Consider a woman named Grace, who stayed in a relationship where her partner's words constantly belittled her dreams of writing a book. "You're not a writer," he'd say. "Stick to what you know." Grace felt her spirit wither. But one day, reading Ephesians 4:29, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what helps build others up." She knew God was calling her to let go. When she did, she found a writing group that encouraged her gift, and her book became a reality. That release wasn't abandonment. It was God's redirection toward life-giving voices. What will you choose today, my friend? Will you cling to those whose words wound, or will you trust God to surround you with voices that heal? The enemy wants you to believe you deserve criticism, that you must endure it to prove your strength. But God says, "I have called you by name. You are mine." Isaiah 43:1. I call you to action now. Pray this prayer. Lord, reveal the voices that wound my soul. Give me the courage to seek relationships that speak your life. Take a step today. Set boundaries with those who tear you down or walk away if God leads. Trust Him to bring people who will speak His truth into your life. Your destiny is too precious to be crushed by destructive words. My dear friend, have you ever felt the pressure to bend your convictions, to lower your standards just to keep someone close? The Bible warns us in 1 Corinthians 15:33, "Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character." Compromise often disguises itself as harmless, a small step, a slight concession, but what starts as a crack in your spiritual foundation can lead to a collapse. Today we're diving into how God signals you to release those who encourage you to compromise your faith, your values, or your calling. When someone urges you to silence your convictions, they're not a gift. They're a snare. And God is calling you to guard the holiness He's placed within you. Let's look at Lot's wife in Genesis 19:26. As God delivered Lot and his family from Sodom's destruction, He gave a clear command. Don't look back. But Lot's wife couldn't let go. Her heart lingered in Sodom. And when she turned back, she became a pillar of salt. That single act of compromise, looking back when God said, "Move forward," cost her everything. My friend, compromise doesn't always look like a big fall. It often starts with a glance, a moment of hesitation, a choice to ignore God's voice for the sake of pleasing someone else. When someone in your life consistently pushes you to lower your guard, to do what you know is wrong, God is waving a red flag saying, "This is not my plan for you." I heard about a young woman named Anna, who had a friend who mocked her commitment to purity. "You're too strict," the friend would say, urging Anna to join in behaviors that clashed with her faith. At first, Anna brushed it off, thinking she could stay strong. But over time, she found herself skipping prayer, softening her boundaries, and drifting from God. One day, reading Matthew 5:29, where Jesus says, "If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away," Anna realized that holding on to this friendship was leading her to compromise her soul. When she let go, her heart realigned with God, and He brought friends who honored her conviction. That separation wasn't loss. It was God's protection over her holiness. You see, compromise is like a termite in the foundation of your spiritual house. At first, it seems harmless. The structure still stands, but if you ignore it, the damage spreads until the whole house collapses. Proverbs 13:20 declares, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." Those who encourage you to compromise, whether it's skipping worship for worldly pursuits, bending your integrity for convenience, or silencing your faith to fit in, are not walking with you toward God. They're pulling you away. The Bible is clear in James 4:4. Anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. Godly relationships sharpen your faith. Compromising one's dulled. Let me ask you a question that demands a response. Who in your life is tempting you to lower your standards? Maybe it's a friend who laughs at your commitment to prayer, a coworker who pushes you to cut corners, or a loved one who says it's not that big a deal. Whatever the case, God is speaking through that pressure. He's saying, "My child, I've called you to holiness." Compromise may seem small, but it's a slippery slope. Think of Samson again, who gave in to Delilah's nagging bit by bit until he lost everything. You weren't created to bend under pressure. You were created to stand firm in Christ. Consider a man named Paul who worked in a high-pressure sales job. His colleague constantly urged him to stretch the truth to close deals, saying everyone does it. Paul felt torn. But one night Ephesians 4:25 came to mind. "Therefore each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully." Paul realized that staying close to this colleague was eroding his integrity. He set boundaries even at the cost of tension, and God honored his stand with new opportunities that aligned with his values. That choice wasn't easy. It was obedience, and obedience always brings God's blessing. What will you choose today, my friend? Will you cling to those who push you to compromise? Or will you trust God to surround you with people who honor your faith? The enemy wants you to believe compromise is harmless. But God says, "Be holy because I am holy." I call you to action now. Pray this prayer. Lord, reveal those who tempt me to compromise. Give me strength to stand firm in your truth. Take a step today. Say no to that invitation. Set a boundary or walk away if God leads. Trust Him to bring companions who sharpen you as iron sharpens iron. Your calling is too precious to be lost to compromise. My dear friend, have you ever sensed God's hand moving in your life? Closing doors you wanted to keep open, creating distance you didn't choose. The Bible assures us in John 15:2, He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, He prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. Notice, it's not the enemy or circumstances that prune. God Himself does the cutting. When He removes someone from your life, it's not rejection. It's His divine pruning to make you more fruitful. Today we're exploring how God's pruning is His strategy to prepare you for the greater blessings He has in store, even when it feels like loss. Let's look at the story of Paul and Barnabas in Acts 15 hours, 36 minutes and 39 seconds. These two men began their ministry together, filled with passion to spread the gospel, but a sharp disagreement arose over John Mark. And the Bible says they had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. At first, this separation seemed like a failure, a fracture in God's plan, but God used it to multiply their impact. Barnabas took Mark and went one way, while Paul chose Silas and went another. Instead of one missionary team, God created two, spreading the gospel farther. What looked like division was God's pruning for multiplication. My friend, when God cuts someone from your life, He's not diminishing you. He's preparing you for a greater harvest. I heard about a woman named Laura who lost a close friend unexpectedly. They'd shared dreams and prayers, but suddenly the friend stopped calling and their connection faded. Laura was heartbroken, wondering what she'd done wrong. But one Sunday, her pastor preached on John 15, and Laura realized God was pruning her life. That friend, though dear, often distracted her with endless venting, pulling her from her calling to serve in her church. When Laura surrendered the lost to God, He brought new relationships, mentors and friends who encouraged her ministry. Her service grew, touching lives she never could have reached before. That pruning wasn't punishment. It was God's preparation. You see, God's pruning is purposeful. Like a gardener who trims a tree to make it bear more fruit, God removes relationships that drain your spiritual nutrients. Some people are meant for a season, not a lifetime. They may have blessed you once, but if they're no longer aligned with God's plan, clinging to them hinders your growth. Proverbs 3:5-9-6 reminds us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." When God creates distance, when calls go unanswered, doors close or connections fade, it's His hand at work redirecting you toward His purpose. Let me ask you a question that pierces the heart. Are you fighting God's pruning by chasing what He's removing? Maybe it's a friendship that's faded, a relationship that's grown cold, or a door God has firmly closed. Whatever it is, stop forcing what God is cutting. Think of a tree in a garden. A gardener doesn't prune because he hates the tree. He prunes to ensure its health. In the same way, God prunes your life not to hurt you but to help you flourish. Hebrews 12:11 says, "No discipline seems pleasant at the time but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace." God's pruning is His promise of a fruitful future. Consider a man named John who worked with a business partner for years. They built a company together, but the partner's vision began to clash with John's faith-based values. John prayed to hold on, but opportunities with the partner dried up and their paths diverged. At first John felt abandoned, but then he read Isaiah 55:89. "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord." Trusting God, John let go, and soon after he launched a new venture aligned with his calling, impacting his community for Christ. That separation wasn't lost, it was God's redirection. What will you choose today, my friend? Will you cling to branches God is pruning? Or will you trust His hand to make you more fruitful? The enemy wants you to fear the cutting, to believe you're losing something vital. But God says, I am the vine, you are the branches. Remain in me, and you will bear much fruit. John 15:5. I call you to action now. Pray this prayer. Lord, help me trust your pruning. Give me faith to release what you're removing. Take a step today. Stop chasing that closed door. Let go of that faded connection and trust God's plan. He's cutting away to make room for a harvest beyond your imagination. Your destiny is in His hand. My dear friend, have you ever felt the ache of a door closing in your life? A relationship fading, despite your efforts to hold it together? The Bible assures us in Isaiah 55:8-9, For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways. When God creates distance, when He shuts doors, you want it open. It's not a sign of His absence, but of His guidance. Today we're diving into how trusting God's redirection, even when it hurts, aligns you with His perfect plan. When He removes someone from your life, He's not rejecting you. He's repositioning you for His purpose. Let's turn to the story of Jonah in Jonah 14:15. Jonah ran from God's call, boarding a ship to Tarsus, thinking he could escape. But God sent a storm so fierce that the sailors, desperate, threw Jonah overboard. That separation wasn't Jonah's choice. God orchestrated it to realign him with His will. The storm, the sailors' actions, the distance from the ship, all were God's redirection leading Jonah to Nineveh, where he fulfilled His purpose. My friend, when God creates separation, you can't control when texts go unanswered, invitations stop, or connections fade. It's not random. It's His hand guiding you to where He wants you to be. I heard about a man named Robert who had a mentor he leaned on for years. Suddenly the mentor grew distant. Their meetings canceled, their bond weakened. Robert was confused, even hurt, thinking he'd failed. But one night, reading Psalm 32:8, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eye on you. Robert felt God's peace. He realized the mentor season in his life had ended. When he stopped chasing the connection, God brought new guides, wise, faith-filled leaders who propelled his ministry forward. That distance wasn't rejection. It was God's redirection. You see, God's ways are higher than ours. He sees what we cannot. A future where certain relationships, though meaningful once, no longer serve His plan. Like a shepherd guiding a sheep, God sometimes leads you away from familiar paths to greener pastures. Psalm 23:3 says He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. When God closes a door, it's because He's opening a better one. Clinging to what He's removing is like trying to force open a gate that leads to a dead end. Trust His hand even when it feels heavy, because His redirection always leads to destiny. Let me ask you a question that cuts deep. Are you trying to force open a door God has closed? Maybe it's a friendship that's faded, a partnership that's dissolved, or a connection you're desperate to revive. Whatever it is, God is whispering, trust me. Think of a river being redirected by a dam. The water doesn't stop flowing. It's guided to a new course, often to irrigate fields that need it most. In the same way, God redirects your relationships to nourish the fields of your destiny. Romans 8:28 promises, all things work together for good to them that love God. Even closed doors are part of His plan. Consider a woman named Sarah who lost touch with a group of friends she'd known since college. She tried to reconnect, but doors kept closing, schedules clashed, responses grew cold. Heartbroken, she prayed, and Ecclesiastes 3:1 came to mind. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. Sarah surrendered the loss, and God brought new friends, believers who shared her passion for mission. Her new connections led to a trip that changed lives, including her own. That redirection was a loss. It was God's plan unfolding. What will you choose today, my friend? Will you fight God's redirection, chasing what He's closing? Or will you trust His higher ways? The enemy wants you to fear the closing doors, to believe you're being abandoned. But God says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Hebrews, I call you to action now. Pray this prayer. Lord, help me trust your redirection. Give me faith to let go of what you're closing. Take a step today. Stop knocking on that shut door. Release that fading connection and trust God's guidance. He's leading you to a path where your purpose will flourish. Your destiny is in His faithful hand. My dear friend, have you ever clung to someone in your life, desperate to keep them close, only to feel your spirit grow heavy, as if you're fighting against God's will? The Bible warns us in Hebrews 12:1. Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Sometimes the weights holding you back aren't sins, but people, relationships God is asking you to release because their season in your life has expired. Today we're exploring the cost of clinging to what God is removing and how holding on can delay the promises He has for you. When God calls you to let go, it's not to empty your life, but to free you for His greater plan. Let's look at the story of Lot's wife again. In Genesis 19:17-26, God sent angels to rescue Lot and his family from Sodom's destruction with a clear command: flee for your lives, don't look back. But Lot's wife couldn't let go. Her heart was tethered to Sodom, to the life she knew, and in one glance backward, she became a pillar of salt. That glance wasn't just disobedience. It was a refusal to trust God's plan over her own desires. My friend, when you cling to relationships, God is pruning. You risk staying in a place He's called you to leave, missing the new land He's prepared for you. I heard about a man named Thomas who held on to a business partnership long after it turned sour. His partner's negativity drained him. Yet Thomas feared letting go, thinking, we've built so much together. But the constant tension stalled his vision. One night, reading Ecclesiastes 3:6, a time to keep and a time to throw away, Thomas felt God's nudge. He ended the partnership. And though it hurt, God opened new doors, better opportunities, aligned partners, and a renewed sense of purpose. Clinging would have kept Thomas stuck. Letting go set him free. That release wasn't loss. It was God's liberation. You see, holding on to what God is removing is like trying to carry a heavy stone while running a race. It slows you down, exhausts you, and keeps you from the finish line. God's call to let go isn't cruel. It's compassionate. He sees the Canaan waiting for you, the place of promise where your soul will thrive. But you can't reach it if you're weighed down by relationships that no longer align with His purpose. Isaiah 43:18 says, forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. When you cling to the past, you miss the new thing God is doing. Every step you take, holding on to what He's pruning, is a step away from your destiny. Let me ask you a question that pierces the soul. What are you holding on to that God is asking you to release. Maybe it's a friendship that's grown toxic, a partnership that's misaligned, or a connection you've out. Whatever it is, God is whispering, let it go, for I have something better. Think of a ship trying to sail with an anchor dropped. No matter how strong the winds are, it won't move forward until the anchor is lifted. In the same way, some relationships are anchors, keeping you from sailing into God's promises. The cost of clinging is high. It delays your purpose, dims your joy, and distracts you from His plan. Consider a woman named Rachel who stayed in a relationship that drained her faith. Her partner mocked her devotion, saying, "You're too religious." Rachel clung on, hoping to change him, but her spirit grew weary. One day, Psalm 37:7 came alive. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Rachel realized clinging was her will, not God's. When she let go, peace flooded her heart, and God brought new relationships that strengthened her walk with Him. That release wasn't defeat. It was God's victory in her life. What will you choose today, my friend? Will you keep carrying the weight of what God is pruning? Or will you trust Him to lighten your load? The enemy wants you to believe letting go means failure. But God says, I plan to prosper you, not to harm you. I call you to action now. Pray this prayer. Lord, show me what I'm clinging to against your will. Give me courage to let go and trust your plan. Take a step today. Release that relationship. Set that boundary or walk away if God leads. Trust that every subtraction is God's preparation for a greater addition. Your destiny is waiting on the other side of your obedience. My dear friend, have you ever felt the pain of a relationship ending only to discover later that it opened the door to greater blessing? The Bible shows us in Acts 15 hours, 36 minutes, and 39 seconds that God can turn separation into multiplication. When Paul and Barnabas parted ways over a sharp disagreement, it seemed like a loss, but God used it to expand His kingdom. Barnabas took John Mark, and Paul chose Silas, doubling the missionary effort. What looked like division was God's strategy to multiply their impact. Today we're exploring how God's pruning, though painful, is His way of multiplying your influence, preparing you for a harvest far beyond what you can see. When He removes someone, He's making room for His greater purpose. Let's linger on Paul and Barnabas for a moment. Acts 15:39 says, they had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and left. At first glance, this split seems like a failure of unity, a fracture in God's plan. But look closer. Because of their separation, the gospel reached more places. Mark grew under Barnabas's mentorship. Later, writing the Gospel of Mark and Paul's journeys with Silas spread the message further. God didn't cause their disagreement, but He used it. My friend, when God allows or orchestrates a separation in your life, it's not to diminish you, it's to multiply your fruitfulness for His glory. I heard about a woman named Claire, who lost a close colleague at her nonprofit organization. They'd worked together for years, but a falling out led to the colleague's departure. Claire was devastated, fearing the work would suffer. But one day, reading Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, Claire surrendered her grief to God. Soon after, new team members joined, bringing fresh ideas and energy. The organization grew, reaching more people than ever. That separation wasn't a setback. It was God's setup for multiplication. Claire's loss became the soil for a greater harvest. You see, God's pruning is never about loss for loss' sake. It's about preparing you for increase. Like a tree that bears more fruit after unfruitful branches are cut, your life flourishes when God removes what no longer serves his purpose. John 15:2 reminds us, every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. Some relationships, though dear, may be draining your energy, clouding your vision, or limiting your impact. When God cuts them away, he's not punishing you. He's positioning you for a season of abundance. Trust that every subtraction is part of his divine arithmetic, where loss becomes multiplication. Let me ask you a question that pierces deep. Are you mourning a separation that God intends for multiplication? Maybe it's a friendship that ended, a partnership that dissolved, or a connection that faded without explanation. Whatever it is, God is whispering, trust my plan. Think of a farmer sowing seeds. To produce a greater crop, he things the plants, giving the strongest ones room to grow. In the same way, God things your relationships to give your purpose space to thrive. Psalm 92:12-13 promises, the righteous will flourish like a palm tree. Planted in the house of the Lord, they will flourish. Your flourishing comes when you trust God's pruning. Consider a man named David who ran a small Bible study group with a friend. Tensions arose and the friend left, leaving David feeling like a failure. But one night, reading 2 Corinthians 9:10, he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed. David realized God was at work. He continued the group alone, and new members joined, bringing passion and growth. The study expanded into a thriving ministry. That separation wasn't division. It was God's multiplication of David's calling. What will you choose today, my friend? Will you grieve what God is pruning, or will you trust him to multiply your impact? The enemy wants you to see separation as defeat. But God says, I am doing a new thing. Isaiah, I call you to action now. Pray this prayer. Lord, help me see your multiplication in every separation. Give me faith to trust your pruning. Take a step today. Release your grip on that lost connection. Stop mourning what God has removed and look for the new growth he's bringing. Trust that he's multiplying your fruitfulness for his glory. Your destiny is in his hands, and his plans are always for increase. My dear friend, have you ever been caught in a storm, not of wind and rain, but of relationships that shake your peace and pull you from God's path? The Bible tells us in Jonah 1:45, then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. Jonah thought he could flee God's call by clinging to that ship, but God sent a storm to detach him from what was holding him back. Sometimes God allows or even sends storms of separation to free you from relationships that hinder your obedience. Today we're exploring how these divine storms are not meant to destroy you, but to deliver you into the purpose God has for your life. Let's stay with Jonah's story. He boarded that ship to Tarsus, running from God's command to go to Nineveh. But God loved Jonah too much to let him stay off course. The storm grew so fierce that the sailors in desperation threw Jonah overboard. That separation wasn't Jonah's choice. God orchestrated it to realign him with his calling. Once in the belly of the fish, Jonah repented, and God redirected him to Nineveh, where his preaching saved a city. My friend, when God stirs a storm, when relationships unravel, doors slam shut, or connections fade, it's not to harm you, but to detach you from what's hindering your obedience to his plan. I heard about a woman named Elizabeth, who was in a friendship that drained her spiritually. Her friends' constant negativity and gossip pulled Elizabeth from her quiet time with God. She tried to hold on, thinking, I can be a light to her. But the tension grew like a storm until arguments ended their friendship. Heartbroken, Elizabeth turned to Psalm 107:29. He stilled the storm to a whisper. The waves of the sea were hushed. In prayer, she realized God had sent that storm to free her. When she let go, God brought new friends who shared her faith, and her spiritual life flourished. That storm wasn't destruction. It was God's deliverance. You see, God's storms are purposeful. They come to shake loose what's anchoring you to the wrong harbor. Some relationships, though familiar, keep you from sailing into God's destiny for you. Hebrews 12:27 says, "Everything that can be shaken will be shaken so that what cannot be shaken may remain." When God allows a storm to disrupt a relationship, He's shaking what doesn't belong so that His unshakable purpose can stand. Like Jonah, you may love the comfort of the ship, the familiarity of that friend, partner, or colleague. But if they're pulling you from God's call, He'll send a storm to set you free. Let me ask you a question that cuts to the heart. What storm is God stirring in your life right now? Maybe it's a friendship that's grown turbulent, a partnership marked by constant tension, or a connection that's fading despite your efforts. Whatever it is, God is saying, trust me in the storm. Think of a tree in a gale. The wind strips away dead branches not to destroy the tree, but to strengthen it for the next season. In the same way, God's storms strip away relationships that hinder your growth, preparing you for a fruitful future. Don't fear the shaking. It's God's hand at work. Consider a man named Mark, who worked with a colleague who constantly clashed with his values. Their disagreements turned into a storm of conflict, and Mark felt trapped. But one day, reading Matthew 8:26, where Jesus calms the storm and says, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Mark realized he was clinging to the wrong thing. He let go of the partnership and the storm stilled. God opened new doors, aligning Mark with co-workers who shared his vision. That storm wasn't punishment. It was God's redirection toward His purpose. What will you choose today, my friend? Will you fight the storm clinging to what God is shaking loose, or will you trust His hand to guide you? The enemy wants you to fear the turbulence, to believe you're being abandoned. But God says, I am with you always. I call you to action now. Pray this prayer. Lord, help me trust you in the storms of separation. Give me faith to let go of what you're removing. Take a step today. Release your grip on that turbulent relationship. Stop fighting the shaking and trust God's plan. His storms are not to break you, but to break the chains holding you back. Your destiny awaits on the other side of obedience. My dear friend, have you ever held on to a relationship long past its season, hoping to recapture what once was, only to feel your spirit weighed down by the effort? The Bible reminds us in Ecclesiastes 3:1, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. Just as seasons change in nature, so do the seasons of relationships in our lives. When God signals that a season has ended, clinging to it delays the new growth He wants to bring. Today, we're exploring how letting go of expired seasons, relationships that have served their purpose, allows God to usher in a fresh harvest of purpose and blessing. Let's revisit Abraham and Lot in Genesis 13:8-11. Abraham could have insisted on keeping Lot close. They were family bound by shared history and journey. But when strife arose, Abraham recognized the season for their togetherness had ended. He said, let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. That act of letting go wasn't rejection. It was obedience to God's timing. By releasing Lot, Abraham stepped into the fullness of God's promise, the land of Canaan. Lot's season in Abraham's life had expired, and holding on would have hindered the destiny God had prepared. My friend, when God nudges you to release someone, it's because their season in your story has passed and He's ready to bring new growth. I heard about a woman named Jessica who clung to a childhood friend long after their paths diverged. The friend's lifestyle clashed with Jessica's faith, pulling her into doubt and distraction. Jessica felt obligated to stay, thinking, we've been through so much together. But one day, reading Song of Solomon 2:11-2, see, the winter is past. The season of singing has come. She felt God's call to let go. When she did, new relationships bloomed. Friends who shared her love for Christ and encouraged her calling to teach. That release wasn't loss. It was God's invitation to a new season of fruitfulness. You see, every relationship has a season, and not every season lasts forever. Some people are sent for a moment to teach, to comfort, to guide, but when their purpose is fulfilled, God may call them out of your life. Clinging to an expired season is like trying to plant seeds in winter. The ground isn't ready, and the effort yields no fruit. Jesus said in John 15:2, He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. God's pruning isn't cruel, it's strategic. He removes what's no longer fruitful to make room for new branches, new relationships that align with the season He's leading you into. Trust His timing, for He knows when a season is ended and when a new one must begin. Let me ask you a question that pierces the heart. What expired season are you holding on to? Maybe it's a friendship that no longer lifts your spirit, a partnership that's lost its purpose, or a connection you're keeping out of habit. Whatever it is, God is whispering, it's time to let go. Think of a tree shedding its leaves in autumn. The tree doesn't mourn. It lets go because it trusts spring will bring new growth. In the same way, releasing an expired relationship isn't a loss. It's preparation for God's new season. Psalm 13 promises that person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season. Your fruit comes when you align with God's seasons. Consider a man named Andrew, who stayed in a mentorship long after it stopped bearing fruit. His mentor, once inspiring, became critical, stifling Andrew's vision to start a community outreach. Andrew felt torn. But one night, Philippians 3:13 came alive, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead. When Andrew let go, God brought new mentors who ignited his passion, and his outreach thrived. That release wasn't abandonment. It was God's call to a new season. What will you choose today, my friend? Will you cling to an expired season, or will you trust God's timing for new growth? The enemy wants you to fear letting go, to believe you'll lose something vital. But God says, I make all things new. Revelation, I call you to action now. Pray this prayer. Lord, show me the expired seasons in my life. Give me the courage to release them for your new work. Take a step today. Let go of that outdated connection. Set boundaries or walk away if God leads. Trust that He's preparing a season of singing where your purpose will flourish. Your destiny blooms when you align with His timing. My dear friend, as we come to the close of this message, have you felt God's gentle hand urging you to trust His plan, even when it means letting go of what feels familiar? The Bible assures us in Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Every separation, every closed door, every pruning in your life is not a punishment, but a preparation. God is weaving a tapestry of purpose, and when He removes someone, it's because He's making room for the harvest He's promised. Today we're anchoring our hearts in the promise of God's plan, trusting that His pruning leads to a destiny of peace and fruitfulness. Let's reflect on Joseph's story in Genesis 37:4-8. His brothers, consumed by jealousy, sold him into slavery, thinking they could thwart God's plan. That separation was painful. Joseph lost his family, his home, his freedom. Yet God used every moment of that loss to position him for greatness. From slavery to prison to the palace, Joseph became Egypt's governor, saving nations from famine. What looked like rejection was God's redirection. My friend, the relationships God prunes from your life are not the end of your story. They're the beginning of His divine plan unfolding. Every cut He makes is to shape you into the vessel He's called you to be. I heard about a man named Samuel who lost a lifelong friend after a falling out. The pain was deep, but Samuel clung to Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you. And soon after, God brought new relationships, people who shared His passion for ministry. Samuel's outreach grew, touching lives he never could have reached. While tethered to that old friendship, that pruning wasn't abandonment. It was God's promise unfolding, preparing Samuel for a greater purpose. You see, God's plan is always for your good. The empty spaces left by those He removes are not voids, but fertile soil for new growth. Like a gardener who prunes to ensure a bountiful harvest, God cuts away what hinders, so you can bear fruit that glorifies Him. Psalm 138 declares, "The Lord will fulfill His purpose for me." Your steadfast love, O Lord, endures forever. When you trust His pruning, you step into His promise, a life of purpose, peace, and power. Don't fear the empty spaces. They're God's canvas for painting a future beyond your imagination. Let me ask you one final question. Will you trust God's pruning, believing His plan is greater than your pain? Maybe you're grieving a lost relationship, a closed door, or a season that's ended. God sees your tears and He whispers, "I'm working it for your good." Think of a seed buried in the ground. It must break open and lose its form to grow into a mighty tree. In the same way, God's pruning breaks you open to produce new life. Trust Him, for He's faithful to complete what He started. Philippians 1. What will you choose today, my friend? Will you hold on to the branches God is cutting, or will you surrender to His perfect plan? The enemy wants you. You fear the loss, but God says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." John 4. I call you to action now. Pray this prayer. Lord, I trust your pruning. Fulfill your purpose in me. Step forward in faith. Release what God is removing and embrace His promise. My dear friend, as we stand at this altar of truth, let the weight of God's promises settle in your heart. He is not a God who takes away to leave you empty. He prunes to make you fruitful, to lead you into a destiny radiant with His purpose. Psalm 35 assures us, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. The pain of letting go is but a moment compared to the joy of God's plan unfolding. If you felt His nudge to release a relationship, trust Him. He's preparing a harvest of peace, purpose, and new beginnings. Surrender your fears, your losses, and your heart to Jesus today. If you've never given your life to Him, now is the time. Come to the cross where His love redeems every loss. Pray with me. Lord, I surrender all. Lead me into your purpose. Step into His plan and let His joy fill you. God bless you.